Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Gkl Ha Set 1-4D Hinge Doctor Kit. This is the kit. This is everything. All of the Hinge Doctor pieces are in one single component kit. And this video is to bring you a closer look at what it is. Installation instructions in this image is also posted down below this video, and let's go over it. It's a Hinge Doctor kit like this would certainly be, in my opinion, overkill if you have a need for only working with a specific size of hinge. However, if you work it with a variety of hinges, like maybe assisted living, where you could very likely have hinges that are closer to residential, and commercial hinges, this would be very appropriate. Universities, they're going to see not only residential caliber hinges, commercial and heavyweight commercial hinges. This would be very appropriate for those organizations as well. So the Hinge Doctor Kit, in essence, includes all of the Hinge Doctor sizes with the HA2, which is intended for residential applications. And we're going to go over the individual pieces. A Hinge Doctor is made to, they say, repair a sagging door in seconds. And how it goes about doing that is changing the hinge, or bending the hinge, or bending the door or frame. And there is a definition of a part of a hinge called, how I pronounce it is called the swag. Some people call it the swage, S-W-A-G-E. It is basically how the hinge is straight until it gets this little giddy up right here. That's the swag. Okay. This is a full mortise hinge because the leaves are swagged, meaning they're bent in such a way so as to permit the leaves to be mortised to the door and frame and leave that gap between the door and frame, which is a 1/16, an eighth of an inch, 3/32, something in that range. If the leaf wasn't swagged and you laid it flat on your table, it would sit flat. Well, that would be the definition of a full surface hinge. You can see how this sort of hinge would not be appropriate for a full surface application because the barrel is sticking out. Okay? The swag on the hinge leaf is what defines the full mortise, the full surface, etc. When you use a Hinge Doctor kit, you are in essence altering the swag on the hinge leaf, or you're bending the hinge leaf, or you're bending the hinge plate in the door, or the door itself, or you're bending the hinge plate in the frame or the frame itself. How that works basically is that the Hinge Doctor is going to slide over the barrel. It's going to rest right there. Well, these flattened spots here, you put your big crescent wrench onto it and you bend, or you put a crescent wrench on there and then slide a pipe over it and then you bend, and you will affect a change on the gap or the sagging door condition of your opening. There are people who love these. There are people who are able to get off a job site because they can swag the hinge leaf by bending it, basically. And I've done it myself, and it does work, and it does at times serve as the proper, best way to go about doing it. And in fact, the Steel Door Institute, the SDI-122 or .122 document, has in the recommendations of working with your margins on a door and frame, it is recommended practice, standard practice, to alter the swag on that hinge to give a little bend to something to mitigate a problem that you might have. So it's recommended. It's an industry standard to do it. My opinion is that I do it as our last result, and I really wouldn't do it on a fire-rated door at all, because fire-rated doors or means of egress doors There are occupancies now that require by code annual inspecting at a minimum, unless it's um, unless it is a program whereby the the occupancy is self-monitored, but they still need to inspect their doors annually. Performance-based option for certain people. But swagging a hinge so aggressively runs the risk of compromising the welds of the door and frame. And I have never broken a weld by swagging a hinge, but I've been on a job site when I could hear the weld pop. Person next to me broke that weld. There's no way to fix that if it's a fire door. It's a replacement. And if it's a situation where it's not a fire-rated door, well, you've got to now do a plug weld. Got to drill through everything, fill that with weld, grind it smooth, or some people will drill and then tap into the hinge plate behind. The problem with it is, if it's a fire-rated door, is that if you break that weld, and it does happen, it's a replace at that time, because a repair of that nature is not something that's permissible to be done in the field. And those plates are sometimes, very often, spot welded. And the tips on the spot weld machine itself, well, when it's time for them to be replaced, they don't penetrate as well as they should. So it may not take a lot for you to really break that weld. And if you're incredibly aggressive with the tool, you can count on modifying the door and frame maybe negatively. It's better if you have a fire-rated door or a door that's subject to annual inspection, to just replace the fatigued hardware and don't alter anything, or replace the door and frame. And a hinge doctor is a very valuable tool, but in certain instances it should be considered, in my opinion, only as a last resort. So what are you going to get with the hinge doctor tool? Well, I've kind of demonstrated how it's going to work, but let's start with the HA1D, and that was the black item that we saw here. And it's going to say right on there what it's used for. For 4.5 hinges, standard, STD, standard. That means standard weight. This hinge that I have is a standard weight hinge, meaning it's 134 thousandths, standard weight hinge. And you will notice, hopefully, that slides down really nice. That movement is supposed to be like that, because when you put your tool on there, you can see, if I were to continue to bend, how I'm going to affect that swag on that hinge leaf. Down here as well. Okay? And again, you get your crescent wrench right over it. So you're going to get the HA1D. It's black. It's for standard 4.5, standard weight hinges. 4.5, obviously 4x4 as well. 134 thousandths. You're going to get the HA2, and that's right here. This tool is going to be more appropriate for your residential leaves, where you've got thinner leaves, smaller bearings, where you really don't need to have anything other than the leverage that can be applied on the length of the tool. Point the arrow towards the lock. Keep the door closed, obviously, so that you're not moving the door as you affect the hinge itself. You can certainly tighten that down with those set screws that are there. Let's see if we've got some additional information on the HA2. They simply only call it a residential hinge doctor, is what it is. So what that's going to do for you, and those leaves are 90 thousandths thick, 86 thousandths thick, maybe 99 thousandths thick, so they're much thinner. And the barrels, they're generally not ball bearing, and you can literally affect each barrel individual, each portion. This is a 3-knuckle hinge. Imagine if it's a 5-knuckle hinge. With this tool on a residential, you can get that right to this knuckle, right to that knuckle, right to that knuckle, right to that knuckle, then right to that knuckle, and affect them individually is how you would torque that over. This tool, you are not trying to move the entire hinge barrel at once. You're doing them individually. Okay? I'd probably remove the hinge pin, affect my change on the barrels, pull that door up, and then drive that pin back down is what I would do with this tool. There is a link below this video to the product page, which will give you more information on the HA2, or at least some more information. HA3D, what's this bad boy for? This is going to be for your, it's stated for ball bearing hinges, but I'm gonna state that this is going to be for heavyweight. Okay, this, the blue HA3D, that's going to be for your heavyweight hinges, 4.5 that are 180 thousandths leaf thickness. You can tell that this tool is just simply too large for a standard weight hinge. So this is going to be for your heavyweight stuff. And as you can tell, it's longer than the hinge, whereas the one that it's made for is not. This is going to be made for your 5-inch hinges. Now, where are you going to see those? Standard industry practice will also tell you that doors wider than 3 foot, like 3'6" or 4 foot doors, they should have 5-inch hinges on them. They're still 4.5-inch wide, but they should be taller and they should be heavyweight, and that's where this is going to come into play. Okay, the blue HA3D. Then you've got the really big one, which they indicate for institutional hinges. This is going to be for stuff that's just obscenely large, things that you don't, hinge sizes that you don't bump into very often. Give you an idea of the size of that. Let's use the caliper. That's going to fit on a barrel. That inside dimension is practically 1 inch. It's 0.9 inch on the inside dimension here. And that's going to be for a 4.5 inch. If you're going to get into some sort of obscenely thick hinge, I don't even know how you're going to go about bending it with a hinge doctor tool like this, these really big institutional hinges. But you will possibly run across them. This one's going to be really uncommon. But nonetheless, you might find an application for it. With that HA2, there is going to be your Allen wrench that will permit you to get a little bit of tightening down over your work. Okay. Lock that down over your piece. Not a problem. So the instructions that are here, there's a link below this video as well to the instructions. They basically show you how a hinge doctor fits. I should have mentioned, this is also going to be appropriate for spring hinges because a spring hinge has a much larger barrel on it. That's where you're going to use the HA4. Okay? Not just those obscene institutional hinges, which you're probably not going to see often. But if you're doing that same sort of occupancy we had talked about earlier, where you've got some residential, you've got some commercial standard weight, some commercial heavyweight, you're probably going to have some spring hinges too. So this sort of kit could be very appropriate for a hospital, for a university, for assisted living, things of that nature. The instructions show, and it indeed states there, HA4 fits prison and spring hinges. Shows you how these are supposed to be used. It's basically slide the unit down and then effect your change with a large crescent wrench. I would encourage you to not use an imported or low quality crescent wrench. I would encourage you to get a very high quality one because you don't want to strip this out over time. Those really cheap crescent wrenches that you'll get at the home centers, they don't maintain a positive lock and they don't stay in position, and you don't want to round any of this over. So be mindful of having the proper tool. If you're going to spend all the money for this item to begin with, you're very likely going to be well served by buying the highest quality crescent wrench as you can. I would generally probably keep something at least 12 inch, if not longer. I'd like to get as close to 18 as I could on that. You know, and speaking of that, the size of the notches on the side, you know, 11/16. Let's check the others. That's going to be pretty close, 3/4. Let's check the institutional. It should all be the same, but I don't know that it is. Yeah, so it's all the same. So your wrench is going to need to fit within that space. So the installation instructions talk about how to go about doing it, and not to scare you off of breaking a weld, but you're going to want to be mindful and listen. If you're hearing creaking, yeah, you're in the danger zone. And if you're doing fire-rated doors, there are people that do certainly have the opinion that it's something that you'll do at 5 o'clock on a Thursday night, and you're going to repair that, replace that hinge first thing the next morning. That's personal opinion. The instructions are there. The product page is there as well, and we've drawn attention to both of those documents. Product page is just an overview of the unit itself. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Gkl products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Now, the full product catalog is handy because what you might want to also have as well, they make a line of steel shims that would be appropriate for mitigation of clearance problems on fire-rated doors, rather than trying to affect a severe change in the elasticity or the integrity of the steel itself. You might want to shim the door. It's a safer way. You won't break any welds that way to do it. They have a variety of other items that are installation tool related. They have a line of machine and wood screws that are meant to help mitigate problems in the field. For instance, their wood screws, they'll have a number 12 head like you'd have on a hinge like this, but then they have the diameter of a number 14 body. So if you've stripped out that wood a little bit, fire door, non-rated door, that size 14 thread diameter is going to help salvage the situation, and they're made of steel, so they're compliant. Any questions on the Gkl? This is their part number HA1-4D Hinge Doctor Kit. This is the full kit. There's nothing beyond this. You get everything with this or any other Gkl product. Please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.